the head of the KKK, Mr. David Duke, he outed me as a Jew on social media, and the pile-on I got after that was insane.
My guest today is the doctor-turned-comedian Simon Brodkin. In addition to having had his own show on BBC Three, he has also appeared on a whole host of other programmes, such as Live at the Apollo and Comic Relief. Initially beginning his career as a character act, his routines have changed over the years, and he currently performs stand-up as himself, which has included jokes about anti-Semitism and Jewish identity. Simon, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing?
My absolute pleasure to be on the show.
So, look, Simon, you've had an extremely varied comedy career, starting out by performing characters, the most famous of which being Lee Nelson. And you've also performed live stunts on people, including Theresa May, Donald Trump, and Kanye West. But in the last few years...
And the chief rabbi, I need to whack him in there.
Of course.
It's not really kosher, mate.
What was his response to that?
I don't know what it'd do, actually. If he realised that the fish balls were actually, what were they? Actually liver balls? I don't know. There'd be a lot of prayers going on. Lot of prayers, frantic action at the in the shul hall as people fretted around the what's it called after synagogue when
the Kiddush.
The Kiddush. Yes, my daughter's having a bar mitzvah coming up, so I need to know these things.
Mazel tov. You absolutely need to know these things. Mate. Yeah, 100%.
Sorry, dude, I interrupted your flow. This is not cool. Saying silly things about pranking the chief rabbi. Back to you, my friend.
No, you've made it better. Okay, but in the last few years, you've sort of been performing stand-up as yourself, as Simon. And in doing this, you have had the opportunity to draw on your own life, for your own material. And this includes discussing anti-Semitism and your Jewish identity. How did you not only begin performing comedy as yourself, but performing comedy about potentially heavy topics like anti-Semitism?
Yeah, always the comedy I did was character stuff. So, and the whole nature of doing character comedy is you completely and utterly hide who you are. The last thing that you want people thinking when they watch a good three-dimensional character is, I think that reminds me of the guy who does the character. So from the minute I stepped on stage to 3 years ago, I always did characters. And the character worked in TV form and in stand-up form, and particularly Lee Nelson, who I don't think you can get a less Jewish character than Lee Nelson.
Could you describe Lee Nelson briefly for those who aren't acquainted?
So Lee Nelson is a happy-go-lucky South London self-proclaimed legend. And he's a spring in his step. He's his 3/4 length shorts on, his Reebok classics, and his popped polo top with a nice cap. And he's bouncing about. You are. He's on a council estate in South London, and he's giving it large. And he fronted, my career for a few years with Lee Nelson's Well Good Show and a load of tours I did. And then, as you say, moved into doing some of the stunts, which were very much in character at first. And then a while after those sort of two big chapters came the moment of thinking, hang on, I would like to start doing stuff out of character and as myself. And that is what I've been doing for the past 3 years. I've had one tour. I'm about to go up to Edinburgh Festival in a few months' time or a few weeks' time, depending on when people are listening. And that was the big change of realizing, hang on, I can talk about things that have only a connection with myself. And that was amazing and liberating and interesting for me. And suddenly the whole name of the game with straight stand-up is to connect and talk about things that can only be true to yourself. So it's the complete antithesis of the character comedy. And indeed, I was sort of hiding behind those characters because I was never quite comfortable in my own skin. And that's been a really cool journey for me, talking about things that are close to my heart. And of course, not having a foreskin is one of them. And so my Jewish identity is something that I've been open about and talking about. And of course, with every bit of Jewish identity, you only have to go 1, 2, 3 generations back until you get some anti-Semitism. And sadly, that's ingrained very much in our culture. You know, my grandma escaped from Nazi Germany. So, and I will not be alone with that. And so, yeah, I started bringing that to the table, bringing that to the stage. And it's been joyous, really, for me.
Mm. What was the reaction when you started doing that? Did you ever have people going to see what they presumed was a Lee Nelson gig and they're like, hang on, what about the Holocaust?
Yeah, yeah. That wasn't quality, which was Lee Nelson's catchphrase there, in case anyone's no idea what I'm talking about. Well, I was a bit worried how people would react as well. I was a bit concerned going from these characters into doing stuff as me. And not everyone, the response has been really, really great. I think people, well, two things. One, I'm always being funny, whether it's in a character or out of character. Two, you've always got to develop as a performer. I'm growing as a human being, and so are my fans. You know, people get older, their tastes change, their tastes mature. And three, I think that one actually gets a better connection. I am able to talk to the audience like I never ever could in character, because when you're talking openly and honestly about things, there is a connection on an emotional level. I think that's what makes the best stand-up great, is that you're obviously always got to make people laugh, but you're genuinely opening up to people. And I think people always appreciate that. I think
Yeah.
people always appreciate just going, look, this is me. This is actually me. And these are the things that I think about. And these are the things that I want to talk about. So it hasn't been an issue. I thought it might be. It hasn't been. And I think the opposite. I think people were up for it and ready for it and wanting it. And they'd seen me, not just in one way anyway, the characters and the stunts over the years. They'd seen a few different bits about me. So I think it was time. There was interest. Okay, let's hear who this guy is and what he's got to say.
Right. Right. I think that's a really, really interesting point, because I remember being at one of your work in progress gigs a few years back, and you were doing jokes about anti-Semitism under Labour and Corbyn. And I remember finding the jokes, A, very funny, but B, feeling quite vindicated in a way, because this was before Corbyn was suspended. So there was still a lot of people denying that there was any sort of a problem, and seeing you perform these jokes on stage in a crowded room in London resonated with me. They offered me some sort of reassurance, and I felt a bit less alone, which I think is when comedy is at its best, like you say. And I know a lot of comedians try and stay clear of politics and potentially divisive subjects. So I'm wondering whether you were ever nervous when discussing these sorts of things like anti-Semitism and Labour in your act.
Yeah, I'm gutted Corbyn's out, because that set was brilliant. I think I think that the best stand-up does have some kahoonies, does have some balls, does have some and I think that saying those sorts of things, particularly early on in my stand-up, journey, because if you're talking a couple of years ago, that would have only been a few months into me starting. It's not bravery. I'm not going to say that, but I am so brave. I stood up there and mocked Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, do I should get a medal for this? No, but I think with any joke, you want to be stood up there knowing that you can justify it. And I think that's the same with any subject, whatever you talk about. Obviously, I don't know, is this international, more listened to around the world or in the UK?
No, we have an international listener. Shout out to all the North Americans out there. There's quite a few of you.
A nice North Americans and North Londoners.
Those two. That's it.
So, well, look, there's been a high-profile comedian over here, Jimmy Carr, who's recently embroiled in a joke which talked about the Holocaust and talked about gypsies, and I don't want to get into the ins and outs, and that was right or wrong, whatever. But when other people ask me about what I think about that, I always just say, well, look, the comic needs to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and go, that can stand up to scrutiny. I can justify saying that because the punchline to the joke is funny enough, obviously, always with a comedian, but also the target of the joke is a justifiable target. And that's something that I haven't always done in my career. I've got that wrong. I'm learning. And that's why this stand-up journey of going out of character and me learning about the art form and where you can take things has been a great journey for me. Oh God, I feel like I'm on Britain's Got Talent here. It's been an amazing journey. Just learned so much. Delighted to be in the semis. So, but I look, of course, when I was stood there, I wanted everything I'm talking about on stage is always I'm wanting to get that off my chest. I'm wanting to say something. And the Jeremy Corbyn thing was really interesting for me because actually I was slow to the party there. I don't know whether you want to call it a party, but I was slow to the anti-Semitism bus. And I, at first, when some of my wiser friends were telling me, look, this Jeremy Corbyn guy, he's an anti-Semite, or if not an anti-Semite, he is a spokesperson and an enabler of anti-Semitism. I was like, come on, what? Come on. I was in that camp. And then once I sort of, it clicked for me, I got it, I realized it, I read enough and saw enough and learned enough. And I was like, oh my God, right. I wanted then to make sure that I was doing what I could. If I'm going to talk about anti-Semitism on stage, well, there is nothing more relevant. There is no hotter topic at the moment in the UK or then in the UK than Jeremy Corbyn. And so I couldn't talk about being anti-Semitism, being a Jew today without mentioning him and what I thought of him. And it wins you friends. It's won me one friend, you. Yes. I remember there was some, and of course it goes the other way. I remember there was a big pylon. Because the Corbynistas have quite a powerful Twitter.
Indeed, they do.
Following and quite a powerful Twitter movement. And once one of them jumps on you, the others are quick to follow. And so that happened after I did a gig. I wish I could remember what the joke was now. I think it was something like, it was early on. So I was saying, I'm Sam Brodkin, I'm a Jew, a 4x2, a Scooby-Doo, and I was running through all these things, rhyming slang for Jews. In the UK, and then I said, or as Jeremy Corbyn would call me, a dirty, filthy, this tirade of anti-Semitism against me, silly little Jew, and there was some swear words in there, but I've in the notes you sent to me, there wasn't much.
Thank you.
Don't swear.
Yes.
I'm holding back. I'm really holding back here. Sort of pinching my arm constantly throughout this talk. So, and after that, someone kicked off, and I then had to. It became, she heckled me. Anyway, after that, she had a word with me. I can't even remember the details, but then after that, when she got home, she went on Twitter. And,
oh my goodness!
It was a pylon.
Yeah.
Where were you, mate? Defending me.
Sorry.
2.5 years to get in touch.
Better late than never. What was did that shock you? I mean, what was your reaction when because I suppose when you're a comedian, you sort of heckle is annoying but not too unusual. But for that to then continue when you get home, that must be what? I don't know.
It didn't surprise me, and I'm used to getting abuse on social media because tragically, as soon as you put your head above water, you get it. I mean, you may it's. I think they will look back on this time and just go, "What were people allowed to get away? You could just abuse people like that. That was allowed." It just feels really weird and really wrong. And at the moment, no one quite knows what to do with it. It's a new technology, and we're still all finding our feet. But it didn't surprise me because I'd seen what happens when anyone goes against the Corbyn movement on Twitter. So for me, it was just it was a matter of when, not if. And I'm used to some other anti-Semitic parlance. I don't know whether you in the show that I've just done, called Troublemaker. That was my first UK tour. I talk about some of the stunts I do. So I've done some high profile stunts or pranks or whatever you want to call them, desperate cries for attention, on Theresa May and Sepp Blatter, and one of them was on Donald Trump, where I so I won't tell you about the stunt yet, but what I will tell you is when you prank Donald Trump has got some fairly right of centre allies, shall we say, and the head of the KKK, Mr. David Duke, he outed me as a Jew on social media, and the pile-on I got after that was insane. It was mad. It was absolutely mad. It was before I was out of character, so I felt much more detached from it. I hadn't made that move into talking about myself, so it was sort of one step removed. Since I've done stuff on stage as myself, everything feels more personal, which is great because you feel like you're really pouring your heart out on that emotional connection you get. But then if you get some abuse afterwards, it feels more about you.
Yeah.
So no, I think the abuse I get is nothing compared to what many people get of any ethnicity, and particularly women, and it all just makes you want to weep.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still in shock at the fact that the head of the KKK outed you as a Jew. I'll close my jaw now.
As I say in my show, to be honest, I already knew. So yeah.
What was let's talk about your latest show. You've just sort of come off your first national tour. First of all, congratulations. Second, what was in that? What were you talking about in that?
So in that was my first foray into introducing myself to these fans who are coming along. And the weird thing is, everyone who's bought a ticket for that previous tour has never seen me do any stand-up comedy as myself, and maybe seen me be myself a bit. I did one television show called, I think it was Britain's Greatest Prankster, where they followed me around for a year on Channel 4. They followed my stunts basically, and that was, I was talking off camera a little bit as myself, but most people don't know. So it was sort of, this is me, and I was talking about being a doctor and a father, and of course being useless across both areas, and then I talked a bit about some of the stunts, not to have a sort of evening with, but to, let me tell you about the time I spent some time in this wonderful prison in Switzerland after pranking Sepp Blatter. No, so this was like, I want to talk about this because it leads somewhere. And that was, I talk about this, it starts off, the first drop in the show that I'm Jewish. I say people often ask whether I get scared when I do my stunts. Not really. Like, you want to know real fear? Try telling a Jewish mother that you're giving up being a doctor to become, and I quote, an effing clown. So and then that leads, and then I talk about the Donald Trump stunt and what happened after that, and then the KKK comes into it, and that's when I then talk about being a Jew, and my grandma coming from Nazi Germany and escaping in 1939, and when I was just 6 years of age. I just turned 6, and she took me to one side. She said, "Simon, be careful. People will always hate the Jews." And as I said in the show, I remember thinking, well, why can't you just say happy birthday? But it opens up this whole section where I'm open and honest and talk to them, and I think people respond, and it's interesting, isn't it? I'm sure something that will cover how comedians in the UK. There's many Jewish comedians, but there's not many of them talking about Judaism. Dave Baddiel, who I know was on your podcast previously, I mean, he's quite exceptional in his. I mean, what an incredible spokesperson! I always feel when I listen to him, I'm like, wow, that's thank you, David, because what he can say in one sentence is better than what I can say in 10 paragraphs. So, he obviously is open and honest about that, but not many others do. Most are Jewish, but have no connection with that identity in a public way.
Right.
I don't know whether that's because in the UK, it's interesting, isn't it? In America, they're much more vocal, much more proud. Jewish stand-ups have been an integral part of the comedy history of America since its inception.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jews and Hollywood go hand in hand. Whereas it's interesting, isn't it? Because there is this attitude. My grandma, as I've mentioned, escaped from Nazi Germany. My dad's dad was a British soldier and got captured by Nazis in Belgium, I think. And neither of them uttered a single word to me about either. And that sort of head down, shut up about it, move on. I wonder if a plank of that is just, we're just lucky to be here. Things don't go great for us wherever we go. So let's just not stick our heads up. To talk about things, you need to feel confident. And I wonder if there's a lack of wanting to mention it because of the sort of the general vibe about being a Jew in the UK is you don't go shouting about it, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it's not something that people talk about or proud about. So I wonder if that sort of carried on, and it certainly did for me for the beginning of my career. You just, I'm not going to talk about why would I want to talk about that. That's private. That's not for public. I'll shut up about that. I'll avoid any hate that comes my way. Whereas I don't know, in America, I'm historically utterly devoid of probably many of the facts I need. But from what I understand, in America, the Jewish culture is much more ingrained and much more part of American society. And so there's probably a much bigger confidence there. I mean, geez, every American movie you watch, every Mazel Tov at the end of every wedding, I'm like, what? And every wedding, or they're always smashing the bottle, and so that obviously that plays across the whole of America. I don't think any British filmmaker would put that in without it being an overtly Jewish ceremony or something overtly Jewish about it. So that I think represents the sort of the bigger confidence of Americans, and maybe that carries onto the American stage versus the British stage.
It is interesting. I don't know if it is because there's just so many Jews in America and it is so ingrained in their culture, or if it's a British thing. I mean, I think it was David Baddiel who said, in America, you can sort of pass as a Jew and be cool. But over here, it's like you think Jew and you think, Stanmore or something. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm on a one-man mission to get that changed.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'm moving to Stanmore. No, I'm trying to make it part of the. I want to do that. I want to be on stage and talking about it. In fact, I'm in my Edinburgh show. I mean, normally you don't want to keep on talking about subjects that you've talked about before, show after show. You want to start a clean slate. But I've got a brand new show, and it's called Screwed Up, and it's launching at the Edinburgh Comedy Festival in August. And even though that was never my intention, I started writing about it and started writing about, because the show's about me really working out who I am, whereas the previous one was a little surface, and I did touch upon some things. Part of it was sort of my hand was forced by David Duke, but this is really okay. Who the hell am I here? What is going on? And that led me to looking into my relatives and hearing where they came from. And obviously, the second the Jew starts looking into their relatives, you got to start talking about the anti-Semitism, and so I'm actually talking about that again.
Wow.
It's not the whole show, and it's not the Jew Hour,
Okay.
and I want it to Simon Brodkin's Jew Hour.
Very different show.
It's a different show. It would work in Stanmore.
JW3.
And obviously I want a mainstream audience. I want everyone to come, and there's not many Jews. So if you're relying on just Jews to come along to your show, there's going to be a lot of empty seats. So, but yeah, I think it is. I think it's something that people are interested in, even outside of the community.
Yeah, I think there will be. And when you're writing these shows, this applies to your last show, but certainly your upcoming show, do you ever find that when you're writing material about issues like anti-Semitism or the Holocaust or whatever, you have the point, you have the statement, but you don't have the joke yet?
Oh my God, that is the bane of my life. If you could see the incredible, interesting, fascinating stuff I've written for my shows that have no punchlines. I've written 100 shows. Me and my writing partner, Luke Toulson, he's he's a great writer, and he knows the art form beautifully, and he's been sort of taking my hand and showing me like this is how stand-up works. This is because although I did it for years, it was in character. It was not the same thing, and it has to be funny. And that's why I think stand-up's it's hard, because you want to be talking about stuff that's interesting, but Jesus, it doesn't half soon turn into a TED talk.
Yeah, it can very quickly, and that is the danger when sort of comedians, they put the point first and the joke comes later, and the act suffers majorly because of it.
Massively. And I don't know, even if you I don't know what people get out of a show that when you open up and when you talk a really, a little bit deeply about things that are really meaningful to you. I hope that the audience comes out of there having had a little bit of think, but ultimately you do want them to be laughing. That is the ultimate currency.
Yeah. Now it's always interesting to see how anti-Semitism is handled at different lines of work, and I'm wondering, how seriously do you think anti-Semitism is taken in the comedy industry behind the scenes?
Ooh, I don't know whether people give it a second thought. It's still very much seen as a specialist subject. Dave Baddiel's book is fascinating about this, and something I've been wanting to ask him actually, as to why coming to the defense of Jews or engaging with anti-Semitism as a non-Jew is still a massive minority sport. It's not cool. It's not the prevailing wind. You don't get celebrities, pop stars posting images of candles on Holocaust Memorial Day. You don't get people coming to people's defense of things. Whereas for something like Black Lives Matter, and I think that it's great. I totally want every community to be shouting and helping other communities. And I think if there is much more awareness about some of the racism that goes on toward the black community, I think that's brilliant. But it's interesting how and I don't know whether that's because numbers. That's the question I want to ask Dave Badir, what he thinks, and not there's some definitive scientific answer to this. But is it just because there aren't many Jews? And so the snowball, the movement, the power, the impact that they have is so much smaller simply because of a numbers thing. There's 15 million Jews in the whole world, and a lot of them live in Israel. And the second you say that word, woo, you're on some dodgy territory. Unbelievable. I can't even mention the word Israel on stage without people shuffling in their seats. It's like using the word disabled. It's like it's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Now, our listeners may recall that you were on a lineup a few years ago at a comedy gig that was run by Campaign Against Antisemitism. Look, so it's clear that you've been cognizant of the issue of antisemitism for quite some time. Has this been something that you've always been aware of, or is this a fight that you've only come to in the last few years?
I've definitely been aware of it. I mean, hell, which Jew isn't? You take away anti-Semitism from Jews, we would struggle sometimes to talk about stuff. It's just pitiful, isn't it? How that is so much part of the identity, and it's inescapable because the second you look right, left, or behind you, it's there. It's awful. It's awful. But I've always been aware of it. Look, I went to Hub on Him. I was in the Jewish youth movement for many years. Loved my time there. I don't think I found out it was Jewish until I was like 17. Oh, I was Jewish as well. Is it cool? Love it. No, you know what it's like. It's just a cool place. When you tell people I went on a Jewish youth camp, they're like, dude, you weirdo. But it's just no, come on. It was guitar playing and snogging. So of course I was aware of it, and as I say, my mum's mum, they had German accents, and there was everyone's history is doused in it, but the sort of overlap of personal and professional engaging with anti-Semitism and opening up about it, that is very new. And that is only since I started doing stand-up out of character and as myself. And then you suddenly, as I've alluded to, you're talking about things that are meaningful to you.
Yeah. Now, in addition to your live stand-up comedy, you also regularly upload sketches to your social media channels. And one of these sketches, which is really...
Yes, at Simon Brodkin on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And JDate. I need to get on JDate. I don't know whether there should be just a comedy channel on there.
Now, one of these sketches involves you reacting to the anti-Semitic tirade from the rapper Wiley in the summer of 2020.
I'm deeply upset by Wiley's comments because he's bloody got us. He's spot on. Rumbled. We thought we were being dead sneaky, but Wiley's exposed the whole thing. We run the world, all right? Hands up. We run it. So Seth Rogen is in charge of all the banks. Dave Baddiel controls the media. Larry David's in charge of governments. Used to be Alan Sugar, but then he got too busy with The Apprentice. Billy Crystal starts all the wars. Didn't see that one coming, did you? Yeah, my uncle helps him out at weekends. And Rachel Riley sets fun maths quizzes for the Rothschilds. You bugger, Wiley.
So you have this sketch where, rather than deny it, you take the opposite route and you're like, you got me. We do run the world. And it's hilarious. And first off, I want to know what your reaction to Wiley's outburst was when you heard it. And how long did it take you before you decided to make a sketch about it?
I remember sitting in the park. I was experimenting, filming some people, like going up to them in the park and just asking them, and I'd sat down for a break. I looked at my phone, saw the news flash come up, and then, or if maybe I saw it on Twitter as everyone was talking about it. I was sickened, I was appalled, I was depressed. It was one of the big slap around the face moments for me with anti-Semitism, because I loved Wiley's music. I had bought many of his albums. This is someone who I felt an actual connection with, and someone who was a spokesperson, well respected, revered, an elder statesman for that community, a wise man, I thought. And there it was, the most brazen, open, sickening, medieval anti-Semitism. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And so, being a comic, it took me about 3 seconds before I thought I've got to make a joke about this.
Do you ever come across an event or an issue that you think that's too far, or do you think if anything is fair game?
Both. I think everything is fair game. It's the comic's job to find that line as to what is acceptable in that moment in time for enough people for it to land with. I mean, every comic's got to take their own decision. Every comic needs to have their rules, their sensibility. I need to be able to justify it to myself, and I also need people to laugh at it. So even if I think this is 100% okay, this is definitely enough time has passed since XYZ awful moment or whatever, and I hit it as a great joke, and no one laughs, I've got it wrong. I'm not a comedian who just goes, no, I know that is good. I probably terrible artistically, but I need a lot of people to be there grinning and egging me on after that punchline has come out for me to go, okay, I've got that one right. But always, I'm always pushing it too far. Always thinking, is that enough? My writing partner's always like, what the? And I've got it wrong. I've definitely got it wrong in the past. So, yeah.
You said earlier how some of the best comedy is comedy with cojones, with oomph, with whatever, something that's saying something. I'm wondering, who are your comic inspirations, your straight stand-up comic inspirations?
My straight stand-up comic inspirations. Bill Burr, I think, is quite marvelous. Just makes it look so easy, and the subjects he takes on, it's quite incredible what he's able to talk about and address in a laconic, easygoing, chat down the bar style and be hilarious with it.
Yeah. Touching on an earlier point, I feel like the Jewish community needs a British Jewish comedian who is basically talking about anti-Semitism, talking about Jewish identity, as you are, as David Baddiel does, and looking to the next generation of stand-ups for all the young Jewish comedians who may want to talk about anti-Semitism, who may want to talk about their Jewish identity on stage, but may feel nervous about it, may be afraid of the response and that sort of thing. What would you say to them?
Well, I think I'm not going to tell anyone to talk about something they don't want to. And it's with anyone's rights to go, I never want to mention I'm a Jew. I never want to. Everyone's got to choose their own rule book as to what they want to talk about, what they care about. You've got to talk about things you want to say. There's no point in saying it because you think it's the right thing to say. It's not, a march, a stand-up show. It's an entertainment format, and it needs to be something that you want to talk about and you think that you can get laughs out of. But if they're wanting to talk about this but feel scared, I would say half a line of amphetamines just get that confidence. No, don't do that. I would say that you'll be. I'd say, what are you worried about? And I'd say, as long as you are writing something you think is funny and that you think is truthful to you, don't worry at all. Do not worry at all. And I think with anti-Semitism, because it's something so close, to our hearts, and something that we are all, most of us, are super aware of, there's probably a bit of a fear factor of stepping out and going, I'm a Jew. But also,
Yeah.
we've got to remember that, by far the majority of people have no issues with no people. And it's important that we don't sort of get stuck in a paranoid loop, because there is anti-Semitism out there. It's always been there and will always be there, that we think it's everywhere in everyone. And most people are lovely and nice and kind and loving, and couldn't give a care less what religion, what color, what ethnicity you are. And when they go and see a stand-up comic, they want to be entertained. And if part of that is addressing something that means something to the comic themselves, hooray.
Right. Now, for those who do want to fight anti-Semitism or talk about anti-Semitism, not just in comedy but wherever they are, and they don't really know how to get started, they feel passionate about this issue and they want to help. Where do you recommend they start? What do you think they should do?
You're now looking to me as a man who used to dress up as a 16-year-old boy for advice to the community.
Correct.
This is a low point for you, my friend. This is a low point for you. So I think learn about it. I think educate yourself about it. I had no idea. It was when I looked through the timeline of anti-Semitic incidents, which I was just shocked. I was like, what the hell? I used to have this routine, and it worked, but it never quite blew people away. But I was putting my daughter to bed, and it came from a truthful moment. And she said, Daddy, is it? I was listening to something at school, and there was talk about these, and she was like 8, and there's talk about what happened in Germany, and is that why great grandma left Germany? And I was like, yes, that was an awful thing. There was this, but don't want you to worry. There was this one horrible man, and he was trying to be very, very mean to Jewish people. I'm always going to be honest with you. I'm never going to lie to you. But you don't need to worry. And then I go back in the room after I've said goodnight, and I say, oh, I've got to be honest with you. There was just 50 years before that, there was this other guy in Eastern Europe, and he also was a bit mean to the Jews. But don't worry, it was just one guy, and it was 50 years before the Germany thing. Night, night, honey. And then I start leaving the room, and I go back and I go, I'm going to be honest. About 50 years before that, there was this guy in Austria, and what I was doing was I was basically going down that timeline of anti-Semitism, and I kept going back into her bedroom, and 100 years before that, in Iran, all the Jews were expelled. They just killed all the Jews, and I'm getting more and more and more brutal. And at the very beginning, they just rounded up all the Jews, and they just, and it was, but don't worry, that was my response comedically to that timeline of going, oh my God, this is not just a Nazi Germany. This is not just a new Corbyn thing. This is gone on forever. And I think educating yourself about that timeline is a really good thing, because I used to dismiss my mum when she'd say, there's anti-Semites about now. I remember saying, this is when I was a kid, so obviously way pre-Corbyn, I'd say, nonsense, everything's moved on. People aren't hating on Jews anymore. That's just old school. That happened in the Holocaust, and everyone's moved. The Germans are now incredibly kind towards Jews. I was pushing back against that, and that just came from ignorance. and a lack of understanding that it ain't never going away. So I think if you really want to fight anti-Semitism, the first thing you should do is have a look at it, have a look at that timeline, and it roots you now to what's going on now and what's gone on behind, and then come and see my comedy show.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent bit of advice. I think that's really, really good, and that bit is wonderful. Now you've just come off your first national tour, Troublemaker, and what have you got coming up? You've got the Fringe in August, and where can people find you?
So the Fringe, which is the Edinburgh Festival, which is I think the biggest comedy festival in the world, is launching my brand new show called Screwed Up, which is talking about me, my discovery of who I really am, having and looking back into the heritage. I also got a recent ADHD diagnosis, which came as a big surprise. I don't think it came as a surprise to any of my friends, but and that sort of made everything make a little more sense. And I always knew I thought different and acted different, and I thought that was just because I was a screw up. But I find out there's actually a condition out there that's responsible for my behavior. It turns out I'm genuinely medically screwed up. And also after I was turned down for I'm a Celebrity, which is this which is this sort of reality TV show in the UK where they bring in a load of fairly low level celebrities, and they turned me down, and I'm like, for not being famous enough. And that was like, what? I've been on the front page of every newspaper in the world. Like, how could I not be famous enough? And that led me to sort of thinking about, my name, Brodkin, and whether it's because that's just forgettable, and finding out my ancestors, who are Russian, were called Chernobrodko. And they then changed their name to Brodkin to try and blend in, which is crazy. And, I know they're escaping the Nazis, but I think they properly ruined my career. I don't think Simon Chernobrodko would have been turned down from I'm a Celebrity.
What are your social media handles, and where can people find you?
I'm at Simon Brodkin. At Simon Brodkin everywhere. So find me. Yeah, Insta and TikTok and Twitter and the damn lot. YouTube, Facebook. Yeah, 100%.
Wonderful. Simon, thank you so much for appearing on Podcast Against Anti-Semitism. It's been a real treat to have you on.
My absolute pleasure. May you keep fighting the good fight, my friends.